Evacuation. More than 100,000 men, women, and children, all of Japanese ancestry, removed from their homes in the Pacific Coast states to wartime communities established in out-of-the-way places. Their evacuation did not imply individual disloyalty, but was ordered to reduce a military hazard at a time when danger of invasion was great. Two-thirds of the evacuees are American citizens by right of birth. The rest are their Japanese-born parents and grandparents. The people are not under suspicion. They are not prisoners. They are not internees. They are merely dislocated people, the unwounded casualties of war. The time, spring and summer of 1942. The place, 10 different relocation centers in unsettled parts of California, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and Arkansas. The relocation centers are supervised by the War Relocation Authority, which assumed responsibility for the people after they had been evacuated and cared for temporarily by the Army. A relocation center, housing from 7,000 to 18,000 people. Barrack-type buildings divided into compartments. 12 or 14 residence buildings to a block. Each block provided with a mess hall, bathhouse, laundry building, and recreation hall. About 300 people to a block. The entire community bounded by a wire fence and guarded by military police, symbols of the military nature of the evacuation. Each family, upon arrival at a relocation center, was assigned to a single-room compartment, about 20 by 25 feet. Barren, unattractive. A stove, a light bulb, cots, mattresses, and blankets. Those were the things provided by the government. The family's own furniture was in storage on the West Coast. Scrap lumber, perhaps some wallboard, and a great deal of energy, curtains, pictures, drapes, depending on the family's own ingenuity and taste, helped to make the place livable.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from Brooklyn, where left is best as it is everywhere else. Greetings, comrades, friends, and enemies. With me, as always, super producer Matt Leck.
Hello.
Head theoretician David Griscom.
How's it going?
Super producer David Slavic is roaming the digitosphere, the Discord, Twitter, everywhere else in the growing, ever-expanding, ever-aggressive TMBS universe. On this week's program, Will EQ, recording artist, writer, rapper. We're talking about political cycles and hip-hop, why rap is in the disco era, and what to expect next. Plus, we'll listen to some of his tracks. Then, Crew, Bhaskar Sunkara. He is the founder, the publisher of the indispensable Jacobin magazine. We're talking about American socialism. What is it? How can it win? Plus, ever-present question of how to deal with the Democratic Party. Plus, does our old friend Elon Musk have brilliant insights on Marxism, or is he literally running a one-man clinic proving that billionaires can be fucking morons? We'll report and decide, and then you'll decide along with us. Plus, we've got a shout-out, a Griscom economic minute, and a multiple actor gulag on this week's Michael Brooks Show. Let's get it. Well, first, we got to talk about the war on immigrants being waged in this country, the strategic white supremacy of the Republican Party and the Trump administration. There's a couple of things to be really clear about here. Yes, there is undoubtedly a broader context and history behind these actions. Going back, in fact, arguably, if we're going to focus in the last 30 years of politics, to a 1996 bill signed by Bill Clinton, written and pushed through by the Gingrich far-right Congress, expediting people being deported from the country then, including people seeking refugee status in contravention of the 1951 status on refugees, and not penalizing people seeking refuge. The growth and proliferation of detention centers was already a global phenomenon well before even the Obama administration. And of course, we know that President Obama accelerated deportations and presided over very vicious policies with regards to immigration as well. However, this is different, and it is an acceleration. And we need to recognize this, not only because we need to recognize the basic objective reality we're dealing with and not draw false equivalencies, but also because we have an opportunity to potentially address three things through the distinct, dangerous inhumanity of the moment, as exemplified by the forced ripping apart of parents and children at the border by the Trump administration with the support of any relevant figure in the Republican Party. And that is, number one, recognizing that this further development of an overtly white supremacist strategy is both at once entirely keeping with American history in a way that goes back, of course, to literally the founding of this republic on genocide and slavery, but also one that is a distinct acceleration in terms of its nakedness in the modern era and coming right on the heels of the distinct historical accomplishment of the first black president, and one that fits a global pattern of far-right populism, which can always be synchronized with capitalism. Two, the center is done. We can keep dunking on the center, fighting the neoliberals, and we will. We'll have to. But that political project is utterly exhausted. It still has relevancy because of money, incumbency, and cultural influence, but it is speaking to no one. It's a constituency of elites with no aliveness in real politics. Yascha Mounk, who is a Harvard lecturer and a director at the Blair Institute, Tony Blair's Renewing the Center think tank in the UK, has a new book focusing on the dangers of populism across the globe. And funnily enough, he actually does an okay job of diagnosing right-wing populism. He also, in contrast to the sort of brands he's associated with, has some basically pretty moderate social democratic answers to how to address the problem in some areas, including dealing with inequality to some extent, investing in education, infrastructure, and other areas as well. And as one reviewer in the LA Review of Books pointed out, some of these answers make a lot of sense, and none of them will ever be administrated without a left-wing populist politics that claws back democracy from a global oligarchy. We already know that at the end of the day, in a conflict between a socialist-oriented politics and a far-right populist politics, capital will choose that far-right populist politics because ultimately, as we see with Trump, there isn't any fundamental contradiction between giving corporate America absolutely every single thing it wants and practicing overt xenophobia, racism, and bigotry. Number three, Achille Mbembe in 2016, the Cameroonian philosopher, suggested that Gaza was a map for how the developed world would deal with colonial subjects globally as we headed into a world of ever-decreasing resources, stricter controls on movements, and insurgent neo-reactionary forces. He wrote, in the United States, the killing of black people at the hands of police will proceed unabated, and hundreds of thousands will join those already housed in the prison industrial complex that came on the heels of plantation, slavery, and Jim Crow laws. Europe will continue its slow descent into liberal authoritarianism, or what theorist Stuart Hall called authoritarian populism. Despite complex agreements reached at international forums, the ecological destruction of the earth will continue. The war on terror will increasingly morph into a war of extermination between various forms of nihilism. Inequalities will keep growing worldwide, but far from fueling a renewed cycle of class struggles, social conflicts will increasingly take the form of racism, ultranationalism, sexism, ethnic and religious rivalries, xenophobias, homophobia, and other deadly passions. The denigration of virtues such as care, compassion, and kindness will go hand in hand with the belief, especially among the poor, is that winning is all that matters, and who wins by any means necessary is ultimately right. And how else could you draw any other conclusion from how we've designed our global system? That was the structural reality. This is the truth of the fact that the neoliberal and right-wing consensus was laying the groundwork. This piece was published before Trump was elected. That was seeded and guided by particularly the policies of the last 30 to 40 years. That being said, it would be wrong to draw an equivalency and not see the acceleration we are in right now. An acceleration that has an attorney general, as we'll watch in just a moment, who has to talk on national television about why his policies are not Nazi-like by, of course, totally distorting the historical record of Nazi Germany as well. Here's Jeff Sessions with Laura Ingraham from last night.
Nazi Germany, concentration camps, human rights violations. Laura Bush has weighed in, Michelle Obama, Rosalind Carter, got all the first ladies going back to Eleanor Roosevelt. She's apparently weighed in as well. General Sessions, what's going on here?
Well, it's a real exaggeration. Of course, in Nazi Germany, they were keeping the Jews from leaving the country. But this is a serious matter. We need to think it through, be rational and thoughtful about it. We want to allow asylum for people who qualify for it, but people who want economic migration for their personal financial benefit and what they think is their family's benefit is not a basis for a claim of asylum.
So there you have it. He's dismissing, of course, people fleeing bone-crushing poverty, other basic humanitarian concerns, often particularly if we're talking about Latin America, policies that are directly or indirectly created by United States foreign policy in the region. We have to be clear about three things. There's a history and a context behind the moment we're in, which is, if we take it back to the foundations, runs through American history and runs through far-right populism across continental Europe. In the modern era, there's no doubt that the neoliberal consensus of globalization, the dislocation of communities, the far-right oligarchs fueling religious passions, bigotry, xenophobia of their bases across the globe also has fed to this moment. And that we are facing new and uncharted territories for the modern time, and you cannot draw a false equivalency. This is something new. And that number three, to the liberals out there, we are the only game in town for actually protecting the values that you claim to cherish. If you want even the bit of restored normalcy, you need to follow a radical path. You need to uproot norms if you want to restore any norms. So we're going to actually open this up just briefly. We were debating this in the office earlier. It was a really good conversation. It will continue in the postgame, but really just of how to balance recognizing the history and the context of these policies, which implicate politicians across the board and both parties, obviously, but without drawing false equivalencies. And I just wanted both Matt and David to just chime in on this and kind of, you know, get your thoughts on sort of handling this balance and these policies as well.
Yeah, I mean, so regarding the legacy of, for example, like democratic power over the state apparatus and what that means for today, it's like basically the question is like how do we talk about Obama? How do we talk about who's previously been in power?
I would add Clinton.
And Clinton,
as well.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
I would just say, just to open it up and to start with, you know, one thing that I've been sort of harping on is that under Obama, we saw a huge expansion of the powers and the infrastructure of ICE,
Yep.
and it was used to terrorize families. It wasn't used in the same way, and it wasn't used as cruelly, and it wasn't used as egregiously. I mean, what's going on right now is an absolute horror show, and to compare the two things is wrong, and it's not going to be successful at getting our message out. But I would say what's very frustrating for me is you realize under the Trump administration how quickly that they've been able to implement this policy. I mean, it's like a wave of the finger kind of thing.
Yep.
And that's because they had these fascists and these monsters on the border ready to implement this kind of thing under Obama, right? And I think that it's a failure on our part if we aren't clear about this, because the worst thing that can happen is if Trump goes away and we don't address the structural conditions that allow this kind of depravity to continue.
And this is also why, and as distinct, I mean, I have trouble with some of the false equivalencies and point scoring that people do at times, but you're 100% right. And that's also why, you know, when Kamala Harris says today she won't disband ICE, that's a problem, a major problem.
Yeah, I think I fall somewhere in between this, and you know, I think the argument is sort of where we want to put the stresses. But my thing is like I'm fairly comfortable having a conversation where the people I'm talking to all sort of basically agree that America's a fascist state, sort of par excellence.
Certainly, with regards to our racial history, that's
exactly
undebatable. It's not remotely debatable.
But I do cringe when it's the Obama did this card, because I do think that oversimplifies and overpersonalizes it. When I think decoupling the going into the long lineage of this shit is better than just saying but Obama did this thing, because I think that is so focused on liberals, right? And scoring points on liberals, which when we were talking about this earlier, David says like those are the people you can win over. So I do think there's a balance here, but I also think it seems so occupied with people who aren't really. They're kind of peripheral at this point.
I think that's true. I mean, I think that the thing that disturbs me on the line you're talking about is that there is a certain type, like the people that want to pretend that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are still in power are the fascists that are running the country, and a handful of people whose only response ever to anything, whether it be this just grotesque, abominable, everybody who's been involved in it should be imprisoned behavior with regards to immigrants. But going through, criticizing accelerated civilian casualties across the world, which have spiked under Trump. Again, not in any way exculpatory. That's another area where Obama's massive expansion and codification of Bush's massive expansion of the national security state has been, the keys were handed to Trump, of course. But the neurotic tendency to rush to every new horror always has to be put in juxtaposition with something that, quote unquote, Obama did is both not the kind of rigorous long-term history which implicates everybody like you're talking about, and starts to look like a very weird, very specialized form of concern trolling, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my response to that would just be this, and I don't think that we're necessarily... I think you and I have a bit of a tension, but it's not as wide as you might imagine.
Right.
Which is that, for me, when I criticize American capitalism, for example, borders are incredibly violent structure.
Innately.
And we don't disagree on that, obviously.
Of course.
But when we talk about these kind of structures that create the conditions that we're seeing explode right now, we're talking about of people whose worldview includes that. So while Republicans enjoy that, like that kind of worldview because they do want to enact violence against immigrants from Latin and South America, liberals believe in a kind of structure that is a rules-based, norms-based structure where you have to punish the wrongdoers. You have to punish people for breaking the law, and there is not as wide of a gap.
That disgusting Tim Kaine quote that you brought to mind earlier.
Yeah, Tim Kaine, for example, was talking about how he doesn't think we should open. Literally,
this was several years ago.
Yeah, this was several years ago. But in Virginia, there was a bunch of undocumented people in Virginia, and he was complaining about the fact that a city hall had opened up their doors to get these people all the calls. Literally, complained about them opening the door, and it's like so there isn't as wide of a gap as what I'm saying between a kind of worldview that is like predominant within liberals, as liberalism defined as like a philosophy rather than people who might vote Democrat over Republican.
Well, and also I would just suggest too that liberalism also defined as a failed electoral tactic set within a playing field that is defined by the right. Because anybody who and this again, this is very frustrating. The last thing I'll say, Obama's abominable policies at the border, I think you're right. I actually think you're right. There is a punitive tendency in that. And there is a thread that maybe we'll get to later with an immigration attorney who had a very disturbing exchange with Obama several years ago with regards to some of the policies that anticipated these separations. And that's real. Although, and then there's another part which is not justifiable, but is just so foolish to not see the foundational difference in. So when Obama triangulated, which is what he was doing, third way Clinton playbook, deport a bunch of people, amp up the border, and then eventually does DACA, which again, like, I'm a material deliveries guy. That's a night and day difference in millions of people's lives. And then he was doing it morally, strategically, in every way wrongly. We should have been on the streets then. He's doing it to set up getting a deal because that's the Democratic playbook. A ineffective and immoral way of getting a deal is a fundamentally different proposition than white America torture refugees. And if you can't not only see, and by the way, if you wanted to say Bush, Obama, and Clinton were two sides of the same coin, and even inside those coins, there's still real material differences in people's lives, that's an arguable case. Bush did want that reform. This ain't that. This is a policy set that is reducing legal immigration, shithole countries, why not more people from Norway, and a party that has decided 100% that the fusion of oligarchy and white identity politics is how they win. That is, within the last couple of decades, not a new thing, but it's a codification of a tendency in a way that people have not seen before, even under really obscene administrations. And that's and we got to be real about that.
Well, I mean, 100%. I definitely understand what you're saying. I mean, I think, there's a lot of tendency to focus so much on Obama on the left.
And that's another, I'm keep jumping in. I think that's also, it is not effective to our broad, why, just think of it optically, why so many people want to focus on the sins of the first black president when he's followed by an overtly white supremacist-based president is not, it's not strategic. Not to say that we don't have to hold and be serious. Conversely, people, they want Obama to come back and he's the second coming and all this. That's nonsense. But that needs to be, that's a dialectic that needs to be balanced.
There's a way, I think, to criticize Obama that sort of doesn't fall into that trap.
There is.
And I think that a lot of people miss it. I mean, I think a lot of people on the left, and I'm going to look at, you're judging people harshly, and I don't disagree necessarily with your characterization, but just for balance, that you'd be a liberal.
You want balance? That sounds like a liberal pussy shit to me.
I feel like a lot of people, like very serious, like immigration activists, were campaigning so hard for 8 years.
Yep.
And this was supposed to be a moment where, things were really supposed to radically be changing. And I think a lot of people are very frustrated that they weren't. And they still have a kind of, animus that they're still holding on to on some level that makes people lose sight of like a strategic value of a critique which I do think is right. And I think that one thing that's sort of frustrating, looking at knowing what Trump is and knowing what Trump was, for example, you look at DACA.
Yep.
And keeping those registrations and not doing something about protecting the identity of those people when we knew who was coming into office.
No doubt.
When we knew about this exceptional moment of this fascist administration, when we knew that Jeff Sessions was going to come in and run and be the Attorney General of the United States, I think not protecting the people who had registered and opening them up to the kind of abuse that we're seeing from the from ICE and from the Department of Justice.
I agree,
think
100%.
that's a shame, and I think that people are rightfully upset.
And moving forward, let's add this to the litmus test. Look, if you're running as a Democrat, Medicare for all, abolish ICE, I mean, I don't want to hear from you otherwise.
I mean, the way I look at this is America policy for the last, I don't know, however you want to put it, like half century, is basically what you'd expect from liberals cooperating with fascists to the exclusion of the left.
Right.
But that also doesn't give you license to lose track of the distinctions between liberals and fascists.
Last thought, if I may. I just think that it's important that we try to make a different. We can stand with liberals against the right, and we can try to push liberals as much as we want and stand with them right now to stop what's going on right now, because what's going on right now is absolutely horrifying. But I think that it's really important that we make sure that we can stand distinctly on our own, and we say that we're not interested in making any of these kind of concessions.
And we're not, and we never will. And that's why, maybe we skip it now. Maybe this will be an unintentional benefit. Maybe, maybe the left gradually takes charge. But look, if Hillary Clinton was president, we'd be fighting her every single day. And there would not be the same level of just raw human suffering. And we wouldn't be having to get back to basic baselines of fights. But I agree with you completely. We have totally different politics. And as I say, if you're motivated by a certain type of liberal concern set, you better get serious about socialism, because you're not going to be able to restore what you want through your failed methods and accommodation of people who will destroy you. And speaking of that, let's get to the shout out, because it actually fits very well. So for 2 days, and we'll get back, people have been asking me if they can get DJ Danerky's beat as a ringtone, so we'll look into that. But I do just want to flow on this. For 2 days, residents in Portland have surrounded the local ICE detention center with a 24-hour encampment, blocking, protesting, shaming. Look, keep it obviously totally nonviolent, all the rest. But this is not a job that, you go to a party. I don't know what I can't think of the equivalent, like tobacco lobbyist. I don't know. You should not be supporting this policy and not feeling the social consequences of it. And tonight, this is on Twitter, tonight without a shred of fucking irony, ICE agents complained that those blocking their trucks were, quote unquote, keeping them apart from their families. Hashtag surround ICE, hashtags occupy ICE PDX. That's in Portland. We need all sorts of this type of activism. Calls, emails, letters, and we have a little bit of sound from this.
Yeah, we played this on Majority Report,
yeah.
but I didn't really get a sense of how big the scope was or really what this was when we played it. But this is the guys.
Okay, yeah, this is them actually protesting ICE agents.
What the fuck is wrong with you people? You guys are separating children from their families. You know what? If you believe in a border, fine, but why the fuck are you tearing?
Yep.
Undocumented! Unafraid! Undocumented! Unafraid!
This is Direct Action Alliance Portland. The very first thing in the video, the longer part, is like them saying, "Don't touch the vehicle," right? So they know exactly where to draw the line, how to not get fucked by these guys.
Why don't you get a job that doesn't tear families apart?
Yep.
Why don't you go work at Whole Foods? Just quit. Just quit your job.
And by the way,
you're better than this.
And this is where you're right, David. We should have been doing this during the Obama administration.
You're better than this.
There's no doubt about that.
Fucking wake up. You're better than this.
And people who are serious about this issue did give Obama a hint.
Unafraid.
All right, so this is great. Okay, guys, let's just do this talk about the show for a minute, and then we'll get to Willie Q. I like that though. There's something very the commentary that transitions to an open inquiry, which will end with Griscom getting a bullet in his head. It's good.
By the way, there's some other good organizing going on Twitter by some people with regards to you just look it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of things to look up. What is this beat?
This is Break the Bank.
Oh, okay. Wait, when did this come out?
I think 2015.
I think usually we do something with a little bit more energy, a little bit more peppy. Well, you know, you always make me happy with Dipset. I'm the biggest Dipset stan. Read Marx, take a run, read Dipset, the TMBS way. Excuse me, what did I say? Listen to Marx.
Read Dipset.
Read Dipset. No, you should read Dipset lyrics. They're dope. Why wouldn't you read Dipset lyrics? We're growing, everybody. We need to reach past 1,400 by the end of tonight's show. Let's do that. We just need 5 more people to do it. Of course, it should be more than that. We're circling in on that 2,000 patrons where we do the Food Bucket Challenge. And we also start, of course, introducing even more content. Now you get the post-game Illicit History series and, of course, Woke Bros. We just banked one. We talked about Trump's space war, Jay-Z, basketball, and Puma. Reflected on the Nas album and the broader politics, gender realities around that. And also whether it was good or not. This Sunday, new, deep, actually, Reagan and I, Stephen Robbins and I are talking about what you can do as we fight against this predator state targeting and terrorizing the immigrant community. Lots more plans in the bank. Next week, we are actually taking off. We need just 1 week of vacation, but don't worry. There's going to be new illicits, new woke bros, and probably even one new sort of mass release illicit that will show up in your feed, and we're going to unlock a post game for everybody else. The week after the TMBS YouTube channel launches, please keep spreading the word. The Discord is amazing. It's a massive, thriving community. Get on there as soon as you become a patron. Do Q&As in there. Tomorrow, for Comrade and Above, that's the next group call. We had one last week. We talked about identity and economics, the future of organizing, and also some new content that I'm planning with a professional activist and friend, Joshua Kahn, on how to actually ground up, organize, and win. He's worked everywhere from Arpayos, Arizona, to the Philippines, to Colombia. That's going to provide a lot of value for everybody. We're growing. We appreciate all of you. And it's time. Patreon.com/TMBS. Patreon.com/TMBS. We will be right back with Will EQ on the Michael Brooks Show. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. It's my pleasure to introduce Will EQ. He is a rapper, recording artist. He's also, I'm not going to put names out there, but he's penned lyrics for people that you've definitely heard of. He's a very talented man. We just came in listening to Whole Foods, which, I mean, I'm never going to go to Whole Foods again. Will, thanks for being here.
It wasn't a Whole Foods, but thank you, man. Thanks for the intro, too.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks for the intro.
How is just make sure you're speaking really clearly into the mouthpiece on your phone so we can hear you loud and clear.
I tried to get digital on you. I put in my wireless earpiece and take it out.
Yeah, you know what? People try. Yeah, headsets never work. I don't know why.
Okay.
Oh, that's a lot better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Cool. Beautiful. Thank you. Will, how did you get into the music business? How long have you been doing what you do, and where are you coming from? What tradition are you in as a rapper?
Well, I've been creating as far as I can remember, from drawing. I remember in elementary school, like I was awesome in elementary, not to pat myself on the back, but I remember designing shirts for the elementary school, et cetera, et cetera. But I kind of got out of drawing and creating and painting and everything, and I kind of moved it towards words and drawing with words.
Yeah. And
I can, as far as I can remember, I remember, the early stuff, like the hammers and, the Vanilla Ices. When I'm a kid, of course, I would redo theirs and make it apply to me, and then eventually I'll get into the Public Enemies, and I was redoing the Public Enemy song. So
when you say redoing, explain what you mean by that.
And I might substitute certain words for candy or chocolate or Nintendo games. I'm just doing it from a kid perspective.
So you were like rewriting their lyrics for you.
For me, yeah. Basically trying to rhyme it the same, but with my own words, and making it apply to me. So that's how I started. And from there, I kind of developed my own style. I was influenced mostly by, I'd say some of my biggest influence was Tribe. You know, I was young. My sister's boyfriend was in the armed forces, so he was traveling. And he put me onto a lot of up north music because you got to remember I was in Atlanta.
Right.
So we weren't too keen to up north music at the time.
That's the
I'm
most
just being
southern.
honest.
By the way, let me
Booty shaker, nothing.
I love it. Will, that's the most southern thing that's ever been said on this show.
I love it. Am I your first hip hop artist? I did.
Yeah, I
At
think
all?
actually you are the first
Wow.
hip. You know, we had a
feel
lot of
special.
hip hop. Yeah, you're making hit. This is TMBS history right now. Let me do this. Let me do this. A shofar for the first hip hop artist on TMBS. My friend Willie Q. We had a lot of hip hop art, or not a lot, but a couple of hip hop artists and DJs on Dope Boys, and Waz and I cover hip hop on Woke Bros. But no, you're the first recording artist on TMBS. I mean, it should be you.
Hey, I love it. Hey, I'll take it.
You have a
I take all the compliments I can get. Say what?
That's one of our tags. You had a theory that you were telling me about political cycles and hip hop and where we're at now in terms of the culture. Break that down. Explain that to the audience. It's really interesting.
I'll start now, then I'll go backward.
Yeah.
Now Trump is in office, the Trump administration. We're about to get some great music. That's the punchline. And you can see it now. It's already changing. Before Trump got in office in the Obama's term, it almost seemed like rap or real hip hop. You know, I love all rap, don't get me wrong, but it seems like what we call real hip hop was almost disappearing. We were worried that it was going away. Now it's different. And I think Trump had a lot to do with it. I think we were content while Obama was in office. I think trap music was taking over. You know what I'm saying? Because we were content. We weren't worried. Now the pressure is on. And, you know, pressures make diamonds, right? Adversity makes superheroes, right? So, but you can go back to Reagan. Who did Reagan bring? Public Enemy, NWA. You know, they came out of Reaganomics. Bush came. I'm sorry. Well, let's skip to Clinton. Clinton came. Clinton was kind of chill, the black president, quote unquote. You know, it's kind of. I mean, some of his policies may have, you know, we might not agree with some of his policies as African Americans, but during the time we were cool. You know, he was playing the saxophone, we were chilling, and that's when the bling bling era came. You see what I mean? You see what I mean? It's like during times where we're content, the music turns into party music, etc. You know.
Well, I was always think of Bill Clinton. I always think of him with that Dipset.
What is that?
You remember Dipset. We were always playing Dipset. So Dipset. So Bill Clinton literally Bill Clinton just being at a club like Dipset. It works.
It's hilarious.
What happened during Bush though?
During Bush? We
got
some great music during Bush. We got hip hop is dead during Bush. From Nas. He was trying to change the game. We had some great music during Bush.
So you're saying, because I know
even Kanye was conscious during Bush. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
Oh no, go ahead. Actually, you know what happened do you want to talk on Kanye for a second? We've had a lot of opinions on Kanye on this show, but not from anybody that's actually in the business. What do you make of his, not only that what's happened now, but you mentioned then he used to have a very different profile as a public persona. What's going on with him?
Oh, with Kanye. Well, we can't put too much. Let me say this right, because I love Kanye. Don't get me wrong. We can't put too much faith behind the man or a human, not just him specifically.
Yeah.
I think I may get in trouble for saying James Brown had conservative views. Am I right? Like,
didn't he meet with Nixon? I think he met with Nixon.
He was cool with Nick. Yeah, he was cool with Nixon. Like he backed some of his thoughts. So, you know, do we then throw away all of James Brown's? You know, I just realized he is a excellent producer, like top shelf. But as far as the content, he speaks from an honest place, but he may not necessarily, I hate to do his research, or, you know what I'm saying?
I do. I think you're Willie Q is the UN Secretary General of rap music.
Hey,
very diplomatic.
I love it.
You though you definitely have a political orientation in your music, and it's interesting because I know, like, from talking with you, like, we were like kind of talking about how, like, yes, like when it comes to actual like politics, you don't want, it's like you don't want to increase suffering so things might be better down the road or whatever. Like, as a political argument, that's kind of a garbage argument. But as an artistic argument, you just laid it out. Like, we were in the disco era. Now Trump's about to produce all these things, like the adversity, like the political argument is different than the artistic argument. And
that's true.
Yeah.
The best music is what? Breakup music, right? But no one wants to go through a breakup, but you do want to hear your favorite artist going through a breakup. Am I right or wrong?
Oh, well, Big Sean
Mayer,
is
like,
my favorite breakup song. That shows my level of emotional maturity.
Say it again.
I said Big Sean is my favorite breakup song. That shows my level of emotional maturity.
Well, I don't love it. Yes, but exactly. But it took the breakup for that song to be produced, right?
Right. No, that was beautiful. That was, but politics is not, I want to actually, we played it into the break, but maybe we have two of your songs that we're just going to play. Mm-hmm. We have this rare opportunity to actually play the song with the artists. And I would recommend, like, everybody we'll have a link, obviously, to Will's SoundCloud and everything. People should check out Will and all the ways that they could find him. But let's play. We played it in, but let's just play a little bit of Whole Foods again.
Okay.
And then I want you to explain what you're doing in the song. And then I think the next one is Let There Be Light, I believe it's called. We're going to get there next.
And then there was Light.
And then there was Light.
And I'm giving you two extremes. I'm giving you my party, still political side, and I'm giving you my poetry side. But, okay,
beautiful.
Cool.
All right, we'll do Whole Foods first.
All right.
Searching for some soul food at Whole Foods. I told you, we the one they go to. They stole blues and rock and roll too. I'm moving on. Yeah, I wish I could tell you I was going home, but no matter where I go, I don't belong. Oh, they don't want me to stay, so they run me away. This ain't a new thing. This how they do things. We had our rhythm and blues thing, then they ran with it like Boot Gang. I'm the soul survivor, helping the soul survive. Media soldier lies, but it's no surprise. Listen to Logic, I don't know niggas that listen to Logic. Isn't it obvious?
I love that
They're
lyric.
fixing the project, white women is jogging, transitions in progress. All of my niggas are targets. They hit us the hardest, then they start living in our shit. When everything we got is stolen, we all we got, so we gotta go in. With all we go through, love's our go-to. This one goes to you. It's so cool.
All right, we'll talk about it. I love that track. I remember you sent this to me a while ago. It really stood out immediately. What's going on there?
Oh man, let me tell you where it came from. I heard some, let's just say some not so great words from Post Malone. I'll just go ahead and say his name. Probably the end of last year about hip hop.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what he was saying, but everybody shouldn't be able to critique hip hop, especially someone and sometimes he doesn't consider himself a hip hop artist. So that's where the song came from. But it's just the gentrification of hip hop, and that's just to sum it up. That's right now in the game we're in right now. It's easier for a non-African American to make it than an African American. So I was just bringing light to that. I have nothing against the different people because it took a lot of people to create hip hop, not just African Americans. But you can't move us to the outskirts. It's gentrification of while you take our genre.
When did that start?
We've always been going through it, but that's fine because, love the Beastie Boys, even though I think the Beastie Boys were kind of contrived or kind of put together.
Yeah.
Just to sell. Just being honest, I can only look at as soon as 3 or 4 hours deep, they were on to a different type of music.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
Who else? As of recent, and I hate to name names, but all the littles, the rappers with the littles in the names, if you look, a lot of those guys, if they're the darker skinned African Americans are locked up. I can't think of their names right now, but different artists. But the little pumps or the et cetera, the white guys or the Spanish guys.
I guess what I'm trying to ask
right now.
So I guess like when I make the crossover, you think I'll be well positioned?
The crossover for what?
I'm just playing. I'm just being stupid. When I put out my LP.
Oh yeah, you're good, man.
Yeah.
You're good. They're giving you all the promo.
Yeah, no, I want
to
to build up my credibility. Do you remember Dave Chappelle's fantasy about being a rapper? But he was like the black sheep rapper, and he literally had like
he literally was a black.
He literally was the
yes.
black sheep. He's like, I'm the
Yes.
black sheep, son. He had a sheep outfit on. That's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life. All right, then let's play a little bit of Then There Was Light Now. And Then There Was Light. I'm sorry. I apologize for my dyslexia. And Then There Was Light. Okay, let's play this now as well.
But the sun sends out light into space. Now, the space surrounding the sun will be black darkness unless a planet happens to float by. If there isn't anything to relate to the sun,
the light's coming, the light's coming,
then comes no light.
the light's coming, the light's coming. Oh God, the light's coming. It's way too late. Oh God, the light's coming. And then there was light. 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 500 years of the same shit. I kinda want Trump to win to see the train wreck. Wait a minute. They say make America great again. If we go too far back, I'll be a slave again. Gemini no sage, tend to fight my old ways. It's rare for men with my skin to die from old age. Black kid caught with crack, they get a warrant. White kid caught with smack, they get a warning. Soon as we get change on us, we get a foreign. They ain't even had to put chains on us, we did it for 'em. Fuck a flooded watch, me and wifey just left New Orleans. Might ignore your call, hit twice if it's important. They take your life, take your land, and take your trends. Is it the way that they were raised or the ways of men? Like a Dutch, life sucks, gotta spice it up. Soul sis, let's coexist, you wanna ride or what? Look, I ain't on that girlfriend shit, but you the one I wanna watch the world end with. Life is just repeating itself, that's my philosophy.
I like that
It's like
one.
a shock to me how much I see my pop in me. I guess the pocket me got haters taking shots at me. Black owned, but my own won't even shot with me. Niggas get a nice ride and hit the white side. It's darkest before dawn, look at the bright side. The light's coming, the light's coming.
All right, that's also really dope. I noticed. I mean, talk about that in a second. You definitely the continuities that I hear a lot of, like the historical circumstances and the politics, and then the migration into basically stealing trends. Like you're building those links a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And now the game is actually getting a little better. I'm seeing, this was during a time like last year. You got to think when hip hop was in a very weird and crazy place. But now I'm seeing the tides change a little bit. I was worried because it just seemed like a certain caliber of rapper was getting looked over. So if you notice, this song actually was written before Trump even came in office.
Yeah.
if you see what I said.
Yeah,
but,
I like that one.
But this is more like poetry will. Like I told you before, it's party will, poetry will. Because at the end of the day, I'm just a poet. I just like to express what's going on socially and put it out in a way you can enjoy it. But this was more poetry will. Just showing you everything I can.
Yeah, you can do a lot. What's next? What's on the docket? As people start to follow you, everybody needs to follow Will EQ. Seriously.
I'm gonna lighten up for a second. I'm putting out a song for couples, the album for your girlfriend or whoever, you and your girl, y'all can ride to. But it's not love songs where you stare at each other's eyes. You can kind of, move to them or whatever. The content's gonna be great too. I'm not gonna be calling women bitches all the whole album, etc. So it'd be great. I think it's never been done. I don't know.
I don't think that's ever been done. I think the closest I remember there was this Dead Prez song once, and I'm not a big Dead Prez was it Dead Prez? I don't remember, but I remember it was like
which song was it?
I just remember the lyric where it was basically, I'm not going to remember this well at all. I just remember it was like they were trying to do one of the earlier versions of like, you're my queen, I want to talk to you, blah blah blah, I'm conscious, and then he's like, I ain't saying I don't want to fuck. He literally dropped it in like the line, like, oh no, like, let me be clear.
They actually had a cool song. I remember the video. They were in he was in the jail cell. It was actually a girl song. I can't. Maybe that's the one you.
Maybe I don't know.
To.
I honestly don't remember. I don't remember their discography well.
So it was two extremes, though.
Yeah, it was the duality. So when are you coming? When is this project arriving?
Oh man, I like the one thing Kanye did. Here's a positive we could thought of for Kanye. He kind of did this, making the album kind of on the spot and dropping it, and then the next day kind of thing. I like that. That's nice. I'm gonna try that. I actually have 4 songs down. I'm probably gonna put at least 5 on it, and I probably will drop it in the next 1 to 2 weeks.
That's exciting.
Tell all your listeners to follow me on all social media.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Before we'll definitely talk more, obviously, but before you jump, we complete the first of many conversations. Tell people all the ways that they can find you and follow your work.
Well, if you want to hear my music directly, of course, you can go to the SoundCloud, soundcloud.com/Will-EQ. Don't forget the dash. Instagram, WILLEQ. Same for Twitter, WILLEQ. And I need some Twitter love. My Twitter.
Yeah, you do. I'll help you out.
Yeah, I need a lot. So y'all help me out. And
follow Will on Twitter.
And
come on,
Spotify.
people.
I'm sorry. Spotify is about to get a lot of content, so make sure you add me on Spotify.
Add you on Spotify. Will, I really appreciate your work. I appreciate, you as a friend, as a dude, and I thanks so much for being the first.
Hey.
Shofar again, hip hop artist on TMBS. Appreciate your time so much, man. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for giving me this platform, man. Really. And I hope this is, like you said, the first of many.
Definitely.
Any hip hop conversations, you know who to call. Mike Jamal, as I call you. You know who to call.
Definitely. I'll get out the Michael Jamal phone. The bat phone, the hip hop bat phone. I think you need to come. I think the next one is, I think you need to sit on a Woke Bros with Waz and I. I think that's the next trip.
Let's do it, man. Let's do it. I love it.
All right, man. I appreciate your time so much.
Epic combos, man.
Absolutely. And please, and everybody definitely check out Will's work. As you could already hear, you'll be very, very, very happy you did. And also, send all of my regards and everything to Kareem as well, who helped make all this happen. He's also in the circle, obviously. Hopefully he's watching. Thanks so much, Will.
He is, definitely.
All right, man. Thank you. All right, everybody. Could you check the door? I think he might be here. And then once he's in, we're going to do, first we got to do the Griscom Economic Minute. Bhaskar Sunkara has entered the building. But first, we've got 2 quick segments we're going to do. Maybe, you know what we'll do? We'll do the Economic Minute, and then we'll get him on. He can do the gulag with us. It's very fitting that he would come do the gulag with us, right? Yeah. But first, we have a new segment, even though this prick tried to talk his way out of it before by fucking contradicting me on Obama and ICE. Because like a good socialist, I brook no dissent on this show. But somehow, no, he's still doing it. This is a great new segment we have. We're experimenting. There's a couple of other ones that might be in the pipeline as well, as we always keep refining and improving the method and the madness. But now it is time, when the music is ready. Matthew, it's okay. I really am quite a bit chiller about these things than certain other people in the game. You just take a second. It's okay. I can vamp. You guys just tell me if you need a minute. I was going to say, I am noticeably chiller about these things than other people in the game. There might be certain people who would really, really freak out if there was a gap like this. They might already be red in the face, as an example. Whereas I just make it mildly entertaining. What is this? I like this. This sounds like 1980s BBC. I like it. It's like, well, joining us now is David Griscom with a communist analysis of the world financial markets. David, thank you. What do you have for us today? I feel like I should be shuffling papers.
Probably only the only communist analysis of the Federal Reserve interest rate hikes that you'll be hearing today.
You're gunning for Richard Wolff, aren't you, David? I believe the gauntlet has been thrown down. You're trying to usurp Richard Wolff, aren't you?
From High Street to Wall Street.
From High Street to Wall Street, the Economic Minute. With Red David Griscom. All right, go ahead.
We're really staying on brand.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the recent Federal Reserve announcement that they're going to be raising interest rates, and just sort of giving us a quick primer understanding of what that means.
Perfect.
Because that's the kind of news that us as socialists on the left usually just ignore, right? Because it's like,
right.
What the hell do we care?
Because somebody has, like, I don't know, done an offensive comedy routine or something to tweet about. So certainly, who would want to talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah, so the Federal Reserve announced last week that they're going to be raising their benchmark ranges from 1.75% to 2%.
Right.
Their interest rates. So what does this mean? So basically, the way we need to think about what the Federal Reserve is and what the Federal Reserve does is the Federal Reserve, for these purposes at least, they set the price of money in our economy. So the Federal Reserve is the lender of last resort. They're the banker's bank. So when banks need extra money at the end of the day, to balance their balance sheets at the end of the day, they go through the Federal Reserve. So these rates end up trickling down throughout the economy and also setting the tone for how investments are working. So just to understand what the interest rates mean, this is the most important tool that the Federal Reserve has for dictating the strength of our economy. So when the economy is good, you're going to have a larger interest rate, a higher interest rate. What does that mean? Well, that means that money becomes more valuable to financial institutions.
Right.
So they don't want to spread it around as much, or they want to make more prudent investments. When faith in the economy is low, you're going to want to have a lower interest rate to try to encourage financial institutions to move money around, because they're not going to make any money by just sitting on the huge reserves that they have. They want to move their reserves.
I'm sorry, it's great. The music. I'm sorry, dude.
Good.
Yeah, it's fucking amazing. No, you don't. Do not change it. You want to hear it. All right, keep going.
But so
this is really good, David. I'm sorry.
So where are we now? After the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, we ended up moving our interest rates very, very low to try to spur the economy, and they've stayed very low. I mean, I'm talking around like 0%.
Right.
And you can't go lower than 0%. So that's why we needed to come up with more. More tricky ways to stimulate the economy, like quantitative easing and things like that. So you can't move the rates too quickly. But now that we're sort of in a kind of economic expansion period, we need to move the rates again. But what does this mean for socialists, and what does this mean for the left more generally? Now, the reason this rate is going to affect the working class, and the reason that we should be a little worried about it, is because this does affect credit card debt, student loan debt, mortgages, and other financial products that we consume. And let's not forget that in America, 40% of the bottom 40% of the population has a negative net worth, meaning we have more debt than we have any assets.
Right.
So we've seen that there's been a pretty significant recovery in the past few years, in the past 2 years specifically, but that recovery has not
trickled down.
Has not come to the working class. Surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise.
And now, back in February, there was a lot of worry that wage growth was expanding too quickly and there was going to be inflation. But if you really start looking at the information, that's not the case for the working class, and wages are actually continuing to be stagnant. So the reason this is a worrying development is that the Federal Reserve is tightening the economy at the moment when we haven't seen any recovery for the working class. Right. The recovery has all been on the top 1% for these major financial institutions. So where we're standing now is we're seeing basically the financial institution of our government, of our financial system, is saying, you know, the economic recovery is over. We need to cool this down to prevent a massive increase in inflation. But we haven't seen these benefits come into the working class. Instead, we're going to see a larger burden for working people. Now, just real quick, can we blame the Fed for this? Like, should we be really upset at the Federal Reserve? It's not a very rational position to take that position, because the Federal Reserve's perspective is always to keep unemployment low and inflation low.
Right.
And if we were to blame the Federal Reserve for this, we would sort of be needing to talk about more structural reforms to our economy. Right. And the reason the Federal Reserve had to become involved in the economy after the financial crisis was because our government failed repeatedly to implement any kind of structural reforms that could deal with the unsustainable way that American capitalism has developed. I mean, we're at a period right now where it's so top-heavy, where all of the gains are going to the top 1%, to the richest people in this nation, that, you know, to really start talking about kind of minute reforms from a financial policy perspective from the Federal Reserve, you know, we're not going to be talking about something that's going to structurally change the economy. And we also need to have that kind of wiggle room for the Federal Reserve, since our government has shown that they have no interest in reforming capitalism.
It's perfect that you do this, because the Federal Reserve is this site, not to say that it shouldn't operate with more transparency and so on. That's a valid policy concern. But it's a site of right-wing conspiracy thinking and paranoia, which is like the classic conspiratorial second-order response. So that even when the right sort of vaguely grasps some of the problems inherent in capitalism, it goes to conspiracy theories or like tinkering around the margins versus, because as you say, you're actually right. Within the rules as we've set, they're doing the right thing. Problem is the rules.
Well, the rules and the rules as they said, it's gonna be the brunt is gonna be felt by the working people.
And but that's the design.
Yeah,
and that's the broader point.
Yeah, and I would just say though, is like absent of any kind of structural reforms. Well, the worst case scenario though is if they don't raise interest rates, which they really need to, even though it's going to hurt working people. Because let's say next year that there is another dip, there is another kind of early recession, and the Federal Reserve can't push rates down like they did to basically prevent like an absolute collapse, which could have happened if the Federal Reserve didn't act the way that they did, 2009, 2010. You know, without having that option on the table, you know, that's a bad situation too. I mean, so fundamentally, we have to return when we talk about, you know, benefiting the working class and getting ourselves out of this slump. It's like we really need to talk about class power, because guess what? The Federal Reserve is not going to save you. And if we don't take control of our own destiny and our own fate regarding these matters, we're going to continue to be at the whim of the financial class, which shows that it has no interest in protecting the everyday livelihood of people.
And that has been the Marxist Financial Minute with David Griscom. Richard Wolff, watch out. He's gunning for you. Okay, folks, and of course we love Richard Wolff. I just like to instigate shit.
David's jealous of his career.
Yeah. Lek really evolved the shitpost there. I like it. The reason that David is a communist is because of his resentment for those with more success, namely one Richard Wolff. Which is why he has a little economics-driven segment, so that he can attempt to drive away support from the old man.
What an incredible origin story. Just like a real hatred of Richard Wolff.
Like that motherfucker. Why is everybody subscribed to the Economic Update? Fuck that. Can I get an internship that turns into a part-time job so I could do economic commentaries on another podcast and we'll undermine that old motherfucker? And then when I take his tenured position, I'm going to go up to him and I'm going to whisper in his ear and I'm going to say, like, I'm actually a Republican and all of the money I make spewing this Marxist bullshit is going to get invested into the energy sector. That is an amazing I actually really like that origin story. I think we're going to keep refining that. All right, we're going to take a brief break. We got a gulag to get to, and then, of course, the great, the inimitable crew, friend, comrade, paisan, Bhaskar Sunkara is here in studio, but we're going to take a brief break and get him settled up. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Joining us now is the founder of Jacobin Magazine, crew for the Michael Brooks Show, my comrade, Bhaskar Sunkara. Thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. This is what, like number 5?
Something like that. I mean, dude, you're a regular.
Yeah, that's good. I've never been a regular, dude.
No,
I normally wear my welcomes out pretty damn soon.
Well, that's understandable, but I have unique taste. No, man, it just goes back to we've plotted, and I mean, everywhere from like coffee shops to a Yankee playoff game.
Yeah, that was a good game. They won that one.
That was a good game. That was a lot of fun. I could almost see becoming a Yankee fan just purely based off of the amount of hatred that people have for the Yankees. It's kind of funny.
Reaction.
Just watch people react. Oh, how could you? It's like,
People resent.
they resent success. They resent greatness.
Yeah, just ask Belichick and Brady. Yeah.
Oh, well, they do. They definitely resent. Dude, they resent, like, wicked, awesome greatness. We're going to do a gulag segment first, and you might like I'm sure you've heard this already, but the music. Are we ready with the music?
I was going to try something different, but do you want
What are you going to try? Sure, try it. And we'll determine whether it works or not in real time. This is more Khmer Rouge music. Look how Matt just started dropping in Khmer Rouge. I don't know what this is. Oh, the Cuban national anthem. Fair enough. It's actually pretty good. I like the Chinese national anthem.
March of the Volunteers.
I like the Chinese national anthem. You want to hear the Chinese national anthem? If you put on the Chinese national anthem,
our show now is just
The greatest national anthem was the old East German national anthem.
Oh, listen to this one. Come on. This is legit. This is like you have your suit on. It's like, we're going to go down to the hills. And when I'm president, a whole lot of people are going to be sent up to Vermont to tap maple syrup. I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, it's very uplifting. It's kind of like the end of a Disney movie or something.
Yeah. All the cartoon characters
like
are in rightful harmony together.
Yeah, this is the montage.
Yeah, I feel like I heard it in Lion King.
It does. Well, did you guys ever watch the Nixon movie by Oliver Stone?
Mm-hmm.
He really has a lot of fun with this music on that one. When Nixon's meeting Mao, and he's shaking hands with Mao, and then like Oliver Stone does one of those like crazy montages where it's like, this is Nixon back home with his parents when he was a kid, and now here he's with Mao, and then here's Mao marching, and here like he just loved to layer. I don't even know what this was.
So this is the East German national anthem. The guy who made it was soon expelled from East Germany.
That's awesome. Why, for making a weak national anthem?
He was accused by his sister-in-law of, or maybe his sister, of being a spy or collaborator or something.
That's either makes a lot of sense or is really depressing.
No, he was
not.
not.
The sister-in-law makes sense.
Oh,
your own sister. That's a little fucked up.
I think it was sister. I don't know.
Oh man.
Yeah. But it really does sound like it should be a part of like a Spielberg movie.
This definitely sounds like it should be part of a Spielberg movie. It's solid.
So how many listeners have you lost?
I don't know. Let's keep going through. Can we find the Ethiopian communist anthem? So we have a gulag segment, as you know, and I wanted to start. I basically have multiple people that I want to throw in the gulag out of this segment. This is Meghan McCain, who I think has not only ended up in the gulag, I think she also, with when Felix Biederman and I think we play a round of re-education or gulag with her.
Yeah.
She got knocked out very early on, no hope of re-education. Meghan McCain is one of the most useless people in all of public life. A sort of quintessential example of the poisons of the trust fund. And here she is in The View talking about the terrorism of immigrants and families being ripped apart in this country right now by I guess she's trying to identify a faction here that she can relate to. So she wants to know where a certain special someone is in all of this. Let's take this look at this clip from The View, and I'll tell you what disgusts me about it, and you guys can tee off.
You will be prosecuted. So it seems like the policy doesn't seem to be going anywhere.
No. Well, there are people right now, with Senator Ted Cruz being at the top of this on the right, saying that he wants to have an emergency bill to keep these families together. He wants to mandate that illegal immigrant families be kept together unless they're aggravated criminal conduct, authorize new shelters, provide expedited resolution for asylum claims within 14 days. There's a lot of people on the right. Who said that? Ted Cruz. He's proposing this bill. So there's a lot of people on the right pushing back on this. And I actually thought this morning when I was watching there's a horrible audio that came out of the children screaming and crying, which I don't really understand how you can't listen to that and not feel somewhat differently about this. But where is Ivanka in all of this? Because she's all for women and mothers, and she has a White House role and a job. And I'm sort of interested that her whole platform has been women and mothers, and she doesn't seem to have anything to say about
I find Trump's overall absence in this more surprising because he is a guy that on the heels of
I don't. All right, let me break down all the things that disgust me about this, and then I'll throw it to you. But first, real quick, we're good audio-wise? Okay. First of all, that Ted Cruz is essentially basically like advocating a Japanese internment policy, which is like families can stay together while they are detained in these centers. It's hardly a pushback towards the war on immigrants happening in this country right now. Besides that, and I don't consider that to be pushback, there is no Republican pushback to this. Laura Bush tweeted something. There's no Republican with any power or clout remotely who's pushed back on this. And then, like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, your dad helped usher all of this with Sarah Palin, and we're still pretending that Ivanka and Jared are anything other than two of the most grotesque, disgusting people on the planet. The whole lot of them in the gulag. Bhaskar, your take.
Yeah, I agree. I would say, though, not to be soft on Republicans, I think it is significant that only 55% of Republicans support Trump on this issue, just because he has their support for 90. Yeah, legislatively, they're just Collins in Maine, and she's
not really. She hasn't signed on.
She hasn't. Yeah,
she's not officially signed on to anything.
But yeah, I mean, they're a hard right party in any other country. Like they're not where Merkel is even.
Oh no, not at all.
Not even on immigration. I just mean in general. The Republican Party is a right-wing coalition that's become mostly a right-wing party over the last 20 years.
Right, and I don't know, man. Does Meghan McCain annoy you as much as she annoys me?
I mean, I don't watch The View as much as you. So no.
Oh, I like Whoopi. All right,
Eddie, that was a greatest moment for the Knicks in my lifetime at least.
Yeah, slim pickings.
Yeah, it has been.
Yeah. So what happened? What was the greatest moment?
Eddie. You know she played the coach of the Knicks in a movie.
Oh,
she's a fan sitting in the 400s,
yes.
And then she gets
Whoopi played. I remember that. All right. So we'll just continue on the gulag theme. Did you know that Elon Musk was a Marxist? Let's read this whole thread. This actually is starting to make me wonder. First of all, Elon Musk is actually, I criticize him a lot. I want to say he's doing a lot of good here. He's proving, again, that he's running a clinic on literally you can be a billionaire and a fucking idiot in real time, which I appreciate. And two, like, literally, is he, like, watching the videos we're doing? Because, like, the level of specificity now of his like whiny, disingenuous complaints are now specifically going to claiming the mantle of socialism. Let me just read this thread and then tee off on it. This goes back to June 15th. Those who proclaim themselves socialists are usually depressing and have no sense of humor and are attended an expensive college. Fate loves irony. This is a guy who sold, I believe it was emeralds from his dad's like rare mineral mine in South Africa. Yeah, okay, sure.
Omit that part.
Yeah, no, you should definitely the whole like mineral business during specific historical times in South Africa guy should totally get on the sort of like lame jokes about lefty college students bandwagon. Would you proclaim yourself anything at all specifically? Taylor Harris, who I have to say from his Avi looks like one of the biggest toolboxes on earth. Elon Musk responds, a socialist. You know, and you just know that what he wants here, like, this is the moment. Like, no one would ever think this. And then he goes, Marx was a capitalist. He even wrote a book about it. And okay, so now he's thinking like it's not accurate, but there's like a kernel of truth in what he's saying. And then we get to Elon Musk has really revealed himself as like a real garden variety conspiracy theorist in the last couple of weeks. Can you scroll down a bit, Matt? I don't trust that Engels guy. He could have made up most of the second and third volume. Nobody actually knows.
That's actually true. I'm gonna hop on that.
All right, no, break it down. Look, you're the communism expert. You think Engels was just like a mad rich kid who was just trying to fuck with his parents?
I think Engels might have arguably been better and more useful than Marx. That's my hot take. But I do think that he assembled a lot of the second and third volumes are all unpublished in Marx's lifetime. They're just from his notes. He definitely had to fill certain holes in the logic, and you know.
Fucking logic.
Yeah, I mean, I think Engels is.
Wait, was Engels a logic guy? Was Engels like, I'm just gonna make this a little bit more logical?
Engels
was a party boy, man.
Engels was a Marxist before Marx. Like he traveled around 1844. He saw the poverty. He saw the power of the industrial working class, and it was his writing conditioned the working class in England to convince Marx.
Okay, so I actually did know some of that, but but that's not what Elon Musk is saying here. Yeah, Elon Musk seems to be implying that Marx was like some type of libertarian. My interpretation is that Marx was like John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, and he was interested in like conscious capitalism, and that was the point of capital. And then Engels, who was this jerk, came along and wrote like an anti-Tesla manifesto. That seems to be what Elon Musk is trying to say here. Yeah.
Yeah, the Marx was a capitalist thing is ridiculous. Someone on the internet was like, so he went through like Frankenstein. Who wrote Frankenstein? Mary, what's her name?
Shelley.
Wilson.
Mary Shelley.
Yeah. Mary Shelley. Good.
Mary Shelley.
Wasn't
Who was Wollstonecraft? Who was that?
Mary Wollstonecraft is somebody else.
That was like
I'm aware that it was somebody else. I would like to know what somebody else did. I like that. It was like top-notch production. It was somebody else. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein.
But no, you're right about Frankenstein.
It was Wollstonecraft.
You're right. Yeah.
Okay. So yes.
But either way, this is like parlor talk that probably kills in his circles. He probably just like has mentioned in a few dinner parties. It makes it seem like, you know, he took some class in college where they made Marx into like a humanist philosopher.
Right.
And he got into it a little bit and maybe just kind of skimmed something or heard half of a lecture.
How do you think Peter Thiel responds to that? What?
Mary Wollstonecraft was Mary Shelley's mother. Sorry. Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein.
Wow.
Okay, that's why it was confusing.
Baby, put down that pipe and get my pipe up.
Do you think Peter Thiel like Peter Thiel's like, he was not a capitalist. Shut up. Stop trying to be clever, Elon. I hate you.
Is Peter Thiel also South African?
No, Peter Thiel.
Who's
but
South
he
African?
Should be South African.
There's another rich.
There's another evil guy.
Billionaire South African. I don't know. Yeah, or it could just be that guy who like murdered his wife. What's his name?
Oh, Oscar Pistorius.
Yeah.
Oscar Pistorius is not involved in Tesla, as far as I know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he was, but I don't think. Yeah.
You know, and they attack that great American Lance Armstrong all around the world. At least he's not murdering people.
Yeah, Lance Armstrong, like
he's a winner.
He lost a nut and he doped up a little bit and he won. First of all, I'm sure everybody else biking is doped up. And secondly, like, he didn't kill anybody. He just left, like, what's her face, a little dissatisfied.
Yeah, he just left.
What was her name? I forgot her name. He dated some singer, whatever.
Yeah, no, he was a pretty odious guy, but I kind of, I'm a Yankee fan, so I kind of.
You have to like Lance
I have to like Lance Armstrong.
I think the translative property is you have to like Lance Armstrong. But let's go through this a little bit. Okay, so this is ridiculous. How do you, but two things though. I mean, well, first I'll do the silly one. How do you respond? Obviously, I get a little bit personally offended at the idea that socialists aren't funny. I'll go up, of course. In fact, I put anybody in this room up against Elon Musk. except in the sort of unintentional irony variety. And then what do you make of the fact, though? I think you're basically right that this is just like some bullshit to sound clever or novel, and he's used to being surrounded by yes men because he's a delusional billionaire. But what do you make of the fact that there's still even enough sort of cultural momentum that you want to hug this brand? What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a sign that he is at the very least getting constantly harassed by people pushing for the union campaigns within his workforces. He's seeing the internet chatter, so it's at the very least showing the left's impact as a kind of subcultural, phenomenon.
Right.
And obviously we have a long way to go to actually make impact in the real
world. To
world.
put him in jail.
But yeah, no, it's
longer term goals.
And also, I mean, just in general, he's been losing his allure not only among investors, and because of his firm, are never profitable, but because he's revealing himself to be just a run-of-the-mill business person, trying to keep his costs low, trying to screw his workers, laying off people. Doing all these things that is taking away from how people viewed him before, which is this like inventor, innovator who didn't have to deal with the messiness of kind of production. Now we just see him like everyone else, And the same things would have been happening to like Steve Jobs if he was alive for some of the Apple scandals.
Steve Jobs definitely got out in time. Yeah, I said it. That is objectively Steve Jobs is a cold clinician. That is an objective PR assessment.
Yeah.
Like in 2018, running a company based on like global sweatshop supply chains, terrorizing people that worked for you. Not even to mention the reporting on like the investigations on the Silicon Valley collusion to not cross hire certain groups of engineers so they can keep their wages down, and and the emails that came out with Jobs tirading at Google about getting people fired because they didn't follow this agreement. I mean, yeah, that wasn't no. I mean, I think the extent to which where we would be at as a culture in terms of being able to critique someone like him is a sign of, some positive cultural momentum.
So who are the entrepreneurs that Americans still love? Like Oprah.
Right. But she is known for first of all, she's known for most people as an entertainment property,
an entertainment person.
And her business isn't, I mean, I agree there's all sorts of critiques of Oprah, but she doesn't, I mean, I guess if she has clothing, but like she doesn't have a primary base of her production chain that is built on union busting and sweatshop labor, at least.
Yeah, definitely.
In contrast to these people. That's a big difference.
And she has the supreme social skills, which none of these guys, have. But yeah, it is a big change. The question is who we go about idolizing next. I'm happy with athletes and Bernie Sanders. I think that's a good combination. LeBron and Bernie Sanders.
That should be our new show. We should do a show called Happy with Athletes and Bernie Sanders.
I'm
totally with that.
I've been having a discussion with one of my friends, like, who do you prefer CEO? I mean, it's not much of an argument in my perspective, but CEOs versus celebrities. Right. And my perspective is like CEOs at least have to have some popular buy-in, where celebrities have to have some popular buy-in, where CEOs are basically just the best psychopaths in the class.
Right, precisely. David, were you going to throw something? You wanted to get in a chip at Musk? You were sitting back. What's up?
I just like how Musk acts like volume 2 and 3 of Capital. We're just like this big dark secret, like it's the fucking Book of Mormon. Like Engels should just like had these hidden notes, and he came out and he says, "I've proclaimed this new book,"
Engels, it was like the Gnostic Gospels. Those were because Marx was a capitalist, and then Engels hid them because Engels hated his dad because he wasn't a factory innovator.
All of these notes are publicly available to academics.
Yeah,
so it's not.
Yeah,
they're more like
typical rich kid who, without a sense of humor, knowing shit. Fuck that.
You should have edited them more. Like those first couple Tupac albums that came out after he died. Those are pretty good,
Yeah, Machiavelli.
Yeah, Suge Knight. Engels should have asked Suge Knight for some help.
Where is Suge Knight now?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's sad. I think he's in prison for something.
He's probably in prison right now.
Yeah, he was not a good guy. Shines out, though. That's good news.
As of TMZ a day ago,
Yeah.
Suge Knight not allowed to leave jail to attend mom's funeral. So it is sad. Yeah.
Yeah, that is. I can't even. Maybe you got a joke. I won't go
did it.
there.
You guys talked over it. I'm going to have a little help from my board. Would you tell that story again, Matt, really quick? The headline?
Suge Knight reportedly unable to attend his mother's funeral.
And Suge Knight asked, and they said,
No. Oh.
"Oh wait, I can't. Where's my board?
It's been malfunctioning.
God damn it! Wait. It's not working. It was supposed to be. I don't think so, but it didn't work. Bhaskar, you're working on a book, which we're going to tease a little bit.
Okay.
Tell us about how do you view socialism in America? And I'll frame it a little bit more. Is it something that has been there in a way that's significant, but because of repression, is it sort of like this subterranean force that has existed in continuity and played a vital role in labor union organizing, anti-war activism, and so on and so forth? Or is it something that obviously is significant in terms of how we assess the world, has produced really important intellectuals, done indispensable activism, but has been, in fact, fairly marginal throughout U.S. history?
Yeah.
And that answer gives us an indication of where we're at strategically, right?
Yeah, I think that what's interesting about socialism in the U.S. is that it has been episodic and it has been marginal. So in other words, Bernie Sanders, in my mind, is a quintessential American socialist.
Right.
That's because he got politicized kind of randomly in when he was in college. He was politicized randomly. He did his best work. He first was in the Young People's Socialist League, which is a youth branch of the Socialist Party of America. But he did his best work as part of a much broader civil rights movement. He was involved in trade union struggles and all these other broader liberal left
And then
struggles.
countercultural currents in Vermont.
Yeah, a little bit of that. And then he knew that he couldn't achieve change for the Democratic Party, so he started running these third-party bids, but most of them were complete and utter failures, like 1%, 2%. I think the best he did before he became mayor of Burlington in a statewide race was 6%. Then obviously he lucked out because in Vermont, this third-party kind of thing kind of fluked, but he only came to national prominence by using the Democratic ballot line. But now he's encountering the structural barriers to change within the Democratic Party. So I think that tale of running into roadblocks kind of is a lot of American socialist history, but we have been at the forefront of every big social advance too.
Right.
But we've done so as being, let's say, the vanguard of a broader left liberal coalition.
Right.
And at key moments, we have been crushed, especially in the 19th century. Trade union and social struggles have been crushed by state repression. There's been a huge history of state violence and employer violence too. Out in the West, it was like private militias committed atrocities that weren't common in the rest of the advanced capitalist world.
Where does that leave us now? I mean, I want to get back to like the just always present Democratic Party conversation. But before we get to the specifics of that, like what is the big picture takeaway of that history now for how we conceive of ourselves in this moment?
Yeah, I think the big picture takeaway is that we are more or less starting from scratch. And that means we need a route to making radical politics more relevant. And that route, I believe, will happen through left populism or happen through a certain variety of Sanders-style social democracy. So we, in other words, need at least a base level of people in this country to say, we want to fight for a welfare state. We want to fight for universal health care. And if you can't build a majority that wants to fight for those things, and if you can't mobilize the majority, you're not going to get anything more radical than that to begin with.
Right.
But I think you need to have kind of the perspective of building rank and file power from below and winning those reforms in such a way that it opens up more possibilities instead of closes them. So I think there's a way you could go about reform that probably is the way that even someone like Elizabeth Warren might pursue, which is kind of a combination of grassroots efforts, but then fundamentally behind closed doors kind of deals to win certain reforms. I'm just throwing that out there as a an example. Whereas I think
she's a good example because I think you're right, because even like the distinction between her and someone like an Obama is that those backdoor deals, at least with regards to the areas where she seems to have some genuine political conviction around in, really the American liberal tradition, which is, of course, susceptible to robust critique. But again, people need to get a little bit more historically grounded here and realize that that is better than the other preeminent American traditions. So that, yes, but it would be a behind closed doors deal that might actually really move the ball forward on a financial reform, on a consumer protection, on a healthcare expansion, on those types of areas where she does seem to have those sorts of convictions. What about the counterculture tendency? Because I think that this is another kind of conversation that cuts across all of the debates that people have with including ones that I think are actually in some ways kind of worn out debates, but call out culture and the distinctions between, economics and identity and all of this stuff, some of which occasionally I think there's serious theoretical and political differences that actually need to be ironed out. And there's tensions that need to be there's actual thinking involved. There seems to be this other sort of stuff, and I just want to lay the table for you because I want your thoughts on all of it. There's the reality that if you have a socialist position, you've been in a counter or a subculture because it's marginalized politics. There's the very noble and very correct leftward politics of and the tension, but a tension that we have to grapple with of, on one hand, we want to, the many, not the few. We want to deliver across the board for everybody. And at the same time, a site and an appropriate site of left-wing activism is the furthest most expanse of where are human beings not being treated well and not allowed to flourish, not allowed to have their civil rights, their economic justice in a society. And that's who we are, and that's, our purpose. And there's something in that, synthesizing that there. And then there does seem to be a tendency that almost doesn't, that views politics as a cultural posture, not a path to actually gaining power. One of your favorite phrases, the last thing I'll say, that I've used myself is this, I hope I'm not butchering it, but you've talked about the idea that we want to be pre-mainstream politics. We're setting the stage for what should be on the table in 10 years, that we're not here to be on the outside shouting out or be cool or have a distinction. We want to win. And somehow there's some tension in, we have to figure out pushing society forward, delivering for all, and then also really thinking about how do we actually acquire power and build up that mass base, as an example.
Well, I think there's a few things at play. I think one is that politics in the United States of every type is weird.
Yeah.
What stands out on the left, if you go to CPAC and you talk to some of the people there or see some of the stalls, I bet you would be just as shocked as if you're at Left Forum.
Far more shocked.
Yeah, there's a lot of
at least
nuttiness.
There's some fundamentally good intentions at Left Forum.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuttiness out there, and there's a lot of people with particular agendas. There's a lot of people who support the Republican Party because they believe it will bring about the second coming of Christ faster. There's or support Israel for that reason. There's a lot of nuttiness out there.
Right.
The only difference is they actually also have political power. So there's more stakes, which means that there's more of an attempt. There's more of that behavior being kind of sidelined. There's also real action to galvanize people towards, and real policy and real power and real whatever, for good and bad. Whereas on the left, there's often just the conversation, the debate, and that's how we exert our power as an opposition. So we get Elon's attention and whatever else, but we don't have his attention on the shop floor when he's able to successfully lay off thousands of people.
He can have a tantrum on Twitter because we know how to get his attention, but he can union bust and
the irony is where's their structural power workers have structural power on the shop floor.
Right.
You know, laying out a few thousand people should not be easy. In France, he would have been kidnapped for a couple days. He would have been, the board would have reconvened, and they would have made some sort of compromise, and maybe only lost 1,200 jobs or something.
Right.
You know, that's not, a Soviet Russia kind of like revolutionary situation. This is like France today.
Yeah, no, the place would be at a standstill if that happened, just from strikes and marches.
On the other hand, so it's hard to say. So in other words, I think of identity politics as the symptom, not the disease.
Right.
But it could be that the symptoms in and of themselves, and identity politics, I mean, in a certain way, right? A certain type of destructive politics, or a certain type of politics that let's say isn't able to bridge to other politics, as opposed to a broader definition which you could construe basically any struggle outside of a shop floor worker struggle as identity politics. So that kind of more pejorative definition, it could be that symptom is now preventing kind of us from curing the disease, because it might prevent us from cohering together the types of coalitions that could actually make change. And I think the key distinction is, any left coalition worth its name needs to incorporate the needs and demands and the individuals who are the most oppressed. So if you have a left-wing party in the United States that doesn't take trans issues seriously, that doesn't take demands coming from trans people seriously, then it's not fit to be called a left.
Yeah, it's just not it. That's just not our politics.
But when it comes to building a majoritarian coalition, you don't necessarily lead or start with the issues of the most oppressed or most exploited. You might start with the issues where you have the most broadest ground right away for coalition building, which might be Medicare for all, it might be a jobs guarantee and whatnot. Then you take your other issues, which are by nature more marginalized, and that's why people want to talk about them, and you cobble it into that coalition. And I think there's a certain way in which, people want to say you can't talk about a jobs guarantee unless you talk about this other oppression. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think you can talk about a jobs guarantee as a jobs guarantee. I think you can talk about healthcare as kind of a, as a demand somewhat, abstracted from other things.
Right.
Then once you're actually at the stage of implementation, then of course you have to consider multiple, the way in which, universal programs might be made not actually universal if we don't take into account particular needs and so on and so on. So, I think there's this moralism on the left, and I think that's the thing that really does distinguish the American left. It's in a little bit of politics, left-wing politics overseas, of course, but this is a very vague way to describe it. Whenever I come back to the United States, whenever I talk to people about U.S. politics, what concerns me is just like the overwhelming moralism and the personal posturing.
Yes,
and I'm not sure if that's because we're small. I'm not sure if that's one of the reasons why we're small. I tend towards a broader structural explanation. This is just a symptom of defeat, but it is a very pervasive thing, and it does remind me of what America is as a whole, and the kind of perceptions people have of American national culture is that it's very individualistic, very moralistic, whatever else. So it's funny that the American left, as anti-American as it is, particularly these people on the American left, more so than others, in fact, embody, I think, a lot of the great cliches about, the United States.
I think that's true. And I think the thing that's so hard is that, and this is where I get, the last thing I'll kind of say about this, I want your thoughts on this too, is I think sometimes people on our side really underestimate the practical side of that equation. Like, I think that, look, racism is an absolutely independent, self-propelling, and a relentlessly powerful force in American politics. And it has undermined the types of cross-racial, sort of mass-oriented things we're talking about at every single turn in American history. At other times, it hasn't, and people need to also know the full history and not have that cliche either, so that's true. But that being said, that like dealing with every form of oppression and bigotry is not only, I know you agree, it is of course a moral necessity. It is also always a strategic threat to the left because all of those categories can be used to divide a mass movement. So that's where I kind of, I think like, look, us on the Marx side need to, be smart on our identity stuff. Conversely, when I look at some like subcultures on the left, it's not even necessarily like, what's interesting to me is that how it's never a policy disagreement. It's never about like what should our position be on the rights of this group of people or that, like always we agree on that, because as you said, if you're not there for that cause, then you're not on the left. But the cultural posture of things like endless group processing, call out cultures, word obsession, being freaked out about comedy or entertainment or whatever. Not only does it kind of fit those American cliches, at least in my experience, and some of this obviously is anecdotal, it's like it's in fact off-putting to every category of people from every single background, unless they come from unfortunately, the type of people that our old buddy Elon is making fun of. Humor-free college graduates from wealthy colleges. So I get to really, my concern is actually not like, if somebody said we need to compromise on the rights of transgender people as an example to win. No, never, because that's not who we are. Never. But conversely, like if you're attached to a cultural posture, not a policy, a cultural posture at the expense of us winning, then I don't know what the fuck you think you're doing.
Right. I think there's a certain way in which the left has become in the United States like the domain of the college educated, right? And other people who know how to speak in a certain code. And often these people are, in fact, quite sexist, in fact, harbor all sorts of deviancies, which is just hidden underneath the fact that they know how to code. It's Bourdieu stuff. Right.
It's cultural capital.
Yeah, exactly.
You have the cultural capital to perform what not being a bigot looks like, what being an ally looks like. It's, often, of course, it's not substantive.
Let's say, like, working class people in the South, like whites and blacks are far less segregated than they are in towns that a lot of elite universities, are in New England or upstate New York or Long Island, these are places where people actually interact with each other and they have friends that are black and they have whatever else. But in the caricature that you get from a lot of these people, there's a deep racism that's at the core of people, particularly working class white people. So then it becomes a matter of kind of trying to exercise it out of them instead of trying to create these joint unified struggles in which black and white and Latino people can struggle together, then, building solidarity on that basis. So it's almost like they want a pure, clean subject. I'll give you the example. I won't name the name, but there was a Indian university professor in Britain who was complaining that the porters at her university were all racist, and the other kind of staff, low-level staff, because they wouldn't call her doctor, whereas they called other people doctor. They would never call her doctor. They would just call her by her first name. and this is evidence of racism. This is like a self-described leftist. So, of course, what they're actually what they are bringing to this is actually a sense of class kind of entitlement, a sense of the anxieties of the professional middle class, which I think are often anxieties that pervade some of these spaces. But luckily that's changing now with Sanders and with so many more young people getting engaged with the left or thinking about these ideas and demanding more things from society. I think that'll be the thing that washes away what we have now and kind of build something different. And I actually don't think that this is a broader, more majoritarian left will in fact be a more sexist or racist or otherwise problematic left. I actually think that most people are fundamentally not particularly racist, for instance, and in the cause of common struggle with other people will learn other perspectives and probably be less.
Well, that's the other thing of like this also disaggregating. I mean, I think it's hard because I actually do. I probably see certain types of particularly racism probably is more like, I think there are slots of the country, or voting blocks specifically. And I actually associate it much more, frankly, with like white suburbia than white working class. That, again, the numbers tell it, the anecdotes tell it. It's an incredibly potent motivator. I think, though, that even in that area, though, I think there. First of all, that's like what Assad Haider says in his book, right? He's like, what you actually do to overcome it is do things together. Like you literally engage in political projects, and there is like some cross-pollination that way.
Yeah.
And also the other thing I'd add too is like, I mean, what do you think majoritarian, any type of center to left majoritarian politics in today's United States is by definition not only that, I mean, it's actually going to be the most diverse undertaking of any politics in human history, by definition.
Yeah. Actually, I don't even know about that. I think there's been national politics in, let's say, a country like India, banding together people with dozens of different languages and dozens of different experiences in the days before there was unifying kind of national building things like television or other common, culture. And that all worked, or China or Russia, all these other, cases. I actually think in the United States, we do have a common culture. The United States isn't really multicultural. Like my family came to the United States, and we have some of our culture. I still don't eat beef. I still, go to pujas from time to time, and so on and so on. Yeah, I'm good child. But
I probably go to more pujas than you do.
But we are still like, we're here to keep what we want from our old, our homelands, but also come here and integrate with the broader culture. And that's the thing that the right's actually afraid of. They're not necessarily as afraid of kind of the a foreign culture, multiculturalism. They're afraid of the changing face of American culture.
There's a lot they can do
evolution.
with balkanization. There's nothing they can do with synthesis, and because that undermines the entirety of the essentialist racist project.
Yeah, and I think we should be wary of a type of politics that says, "Oh, you have your thing and we have our thing, but I'm glad you're here." That's the most insulting thing anyone could say. I actually had a funny. I'm
so glad you're here to serve me your people's food.
Yeah. You make our food a little bit spicier and yada yada. And that's actually just a flip of, we don't want these people here because they're weird and foreign. Like those are kind of weird parallels. Well, instead, like even the old liberal idea of, even in its name, it has, racist origins, like the melting pot, its names. But even that idea of a common kind of mixture and culture and whatnot is more progressive. I think what's unique in the United States is, of course, the fact that every single group has been able to be integrated in with this culture over time, even if there's fierce resistance when they first arrive, with the exception of Black Americans. And I think that's where, when we talk about racism in the U.S., we should be talking about the particularity of Black oppression. I think that's where I have more maybe time and patience for certain forms of identity politics, or certain politics that I think are like Black nationalist politics. I think are ultimately counterproductive. But you understand where it comes from. I think those on the left that are looking at, let's see, the Latino population and saying that demographically this is bound to be a boon to the left, I think is underestimating to the extent to which past generations of ethnic whites or people like even Italians and others were at first coded as being kind of foreign and later became incorporated.
Yeah, there's how the Irish became white. Let's just touch on this for a few minutes before we go to the post game. Where are you at now with how to relate to the Democratic Party? I'll just say I think that it's a very unsatisfying conversation to me, because I think that, the posture of forget the Democrats and either sort of third-party fantasies. I mean, I did a conversation recently with C. Derek Varn of Zero Books. He's a really brilliant guy. And he said, he's like, in order to do the types of electoral reforms you would need to make third parties viable in the United States, this has the same level of practical possibility as armed insurrection, which is a slight exaggeration, but it's not as much of an exaggeration as people realize. Stipulating that, of course, in a place like New York City, why the hell not have a socialist party that runs against Democrats and so on?
We could have more votes than the Republicans ever over Staten Island.
Yeah, right. No doubt. So to engage with Democratic Party, I don't have time for sort of anti-electoral fantasies and false equivalencies. On the other hand, I'm not entirely convinced that the Democratic Party is just a shell of our vehicle and of what our desires are. I think both because of the current dynamics of the Democratic Party, but even just actually historically. I mean, if you look at part of the reason Jeremy Corbyn could take over labor the way he has is that Blair and Brown were the aberration. That's historically a labor party, whether center to center right, but he has a tradition he can pull from. The Democratic Party is a very complex tradition. In some ways, the last thing I'll say, I mean, take one that's positive. We focus on the negatives a lot. Part of the reason I think that there's a real constituency for Medicare for All is because people like my grandmother, who's an old line Union Democrat, knows that that is what Truman and FDR said we should have, and it makes sense to her. And that is in the context of a Union Democratic tradition, not a socialist one. So it's a balance, but there's a lot of other ways in which the fact that the Democratic Party is not a labor party and has been everything from an apartheid party to a business party structurally is not advantageous for us.
Well, it has had a hidden labor party component to it, too, in the 50s and 60s. It did have institutionally the UAW and the AFL and other kind of groups within the within it. I would say that often one thing that Corbyn had to his advantage is that there was a fortress to storm. Right. People who often say that you could just take over the Democratic Party say there's no real big structure. There's no way to impose party discipline. There's no structure to keep it from being something else. I mean, this sounds glib. I get into it in more depth in my book, but I think the fact that there is no structure actually is a source of strength for the corporate forces within the party, because there's not just one fortress to storm. There's 1,000, and it's constantly shifting. So I think, in other words, and this is something I do. I mean, I'm not really plugging this book because it's not going to be out till the end of April next year. I did finish it though. Nice. I see your board isn't even.
I'm trying to think of what to put for this. I was gonna do this,
baby, put down that pipe
just to be a jerk.
My pipe up.
And I also like the classic Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah. Give me any Alex Jones.
Oh, do we have an Alex drop for him?
This is all coded.
Perfect. It's all coded. It's ready to go.
Oh my God, Alex! Greatest broadcaster of our generation. Just amazing.
Any generation, maybe.
Yeah, no, he's up there. He's fucking great.
So
we've got some Alex Jones for the post game. Don't worry.
That's good. That's good. That's the reason why I come here, just to catch up my Jonesisms. I do think you need to. Seth Ackerman talked about it in a Jackman piece that's already out. It came out in late 2016, called "Blueprint for a New Party." Basically, I think we need to use the Democratic Party. But not just as individuals who decide to do well. I think we need to have a coherent organization together to say we're going to run 20 candidates under this common platform, this common program, and tell people we're not just regular Democrats, we're democratic socialists, we're whatever.
Right.
And even if we are running on the Democratic ballot line, we form our own caucus, we have our own independent funding, there's some degree of internal cohesion and discipline. then maybe you reach a point where you could run again as independents, or start going from running 100% of the Democratic ballot line to running on 30% of the Democratic Party ballot line. And of course, you're going to have to do politics. You're going to have to figure out the mechanisms it takes to not become more conservative or develop a bureaucracy that pushes you to the right or whatever else. But you basically seek, just like we're right now using Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders is using the Democratic Party to construct something leftward.
Right.
We do that, but in a little bit more cohesive way, because right now it's very hard to tell what are the 20 points that our revolution candidates have to agree on. They're not really linked together, even to the extent that the Tea Party folks were linked together.
Right.
Their funding base is none of it's really coming from unions or whatnot. So I would think of it as, we need to break with the Democratic Party, but we need to go through the Democratic Party. And if we're going through the Democratic Party and I happen to be Ron, and the we're able to transform the party, then so be it. Then I'm Ron.
Sure.
But the strategy, I think, can't be creating national third parties. In New York City and Vermont and a few places, right away we could run as independents. I just think the whole Green Party effort, at least at this point, has been it's become sad. It's become pretty like a laughingstock.
Well, they're because their strategy is just completely off. Let's actually take a second. We're going to know the post game in a second. This is a clip from actually just we want to just shout her out because she's a great candidate, and obviously, what's her full name again? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's running as Joe Crowley in a district that covers part of Queens and the Bronx, New York City. When is voting? Voting day, I think, is actually next week in this race. But is that right? Maybe we could look that up.
It's coming up.
Yeah, I think it's next week.
It is next week. So she's been running, I want to say, really a distinctly impressive campaign, and she's somebody who I think is a positive version of things we're talking about. I mean, she's a Bernie person. She's been involved in everything from Standing Rock to Black Lives Matter, and Joe Crowley is kind of like the sort of quintessential kind of fusion of kind of like old school conservative sort of machine Democrat, but also moneyed up by all of the oligarchic interests of our time, Wall Street, real estate. He also voted in ways that have seriously harmed Puerto Rico and left it open to type of vulture capitalists that are stripping it apart. She's running a really effective campaign, and let's just play a minute of their debate.
Endorsed by DSA.
Endorsed by DSA and Our Revolution. Let's play a minute of this debate from earlier this week.
Antithetical to everything that I believe in, and that's what I fight for every day.
You know what? If this organization is as fascist as you have called it, and you have said it's fascist, then why don't you adopt the stance to eliminate it? This is a moral problem, and your response has been to apply more paperwork to this situation, to have ICE collect more information on immigrants, and that puts our communities in danger, and it also conveys a profound misunderstanding of how we should be approaching this problem.
She's great. And that's by the way, that is the sort of quintessential distinction, I'd say, between a socialist and liberal position. It's fascist, let's have it fill out more forms, versus it's fascist, let's dismantle it, as we must do with ICE, of course. So very eager.
Yeah. And just seems sharper and seems smarter in all her media than other people, and I think that's really important. That's a far cry from socialists being the kind of pie in the sky, confused, whatever. I think we have to seem sharper with our numbers, sharper with whatever, and she really is that way.
Definitely. Folks, as always, want to thank everybody. We continue to grow on Patreon, and if you become a patron now, you will enjoy just a marathon Dave Rubin takedown that is going to be happening in the post game. Our friend Amy Teresa, who is the co-host of Dead Pundit Society and comrade on Twitter, she actually gave us time codes for this, and it's going to be savage. Taking on the dumbest man on the internet. That's quite a comment. Listen back to
There's a big market for watching Dave Rubin do dumb things.
We're gonna Mystery Science Theater it soon, no doubt, including probably more of Rogan putting him in logic chokeholds. The recent we just did the illicit history couplet with Mark Potanga, actually, from the Belgian Workers' Party, based off of A Peace and Catalyst. Then Mark Blythe and I talked about the Eurozone. Become a patron today. There's a massive amount of content you get. And also in the post game, I will be reading a selection from The President is Missing by Bill Clinton and James Patterson. And we will also be speculating on future projects with the theme of where did the president go? Where could he be? Also in the post game. It's time to become a patron. Patreon.com/TMBS. Thanks to everybody in the TMBS universe. Thank you, Bhaskar Sunkara, crew, Jacobin. He's staying with us for the post game, of course. Thank you to Matt Leck, David Slavic, intern James, and David Griscom. We will see you shortly.